had a bunch of time to sit and review footage and gather my thoughts and take some notes, and now I think it's time for us to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Lotus Asakura, the one who never knows best, and in today's video I want to talk to you guys some more about Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, and basically talked about everything that I liked and everything that I didn't like about the game and my experience with the beta this past weekend. Before we even get into my likes and dislikes though, I just want to say that more importantly and above everything else, I had a lot of fun. I think this game has a lot of potential to be really big in terms of, you know, player base, tournaments, content, everything like that. I think this game is going to be one of the bigger titles for the foreseeable future in the FGC. And I'm hoping for it, man, because I had a great time with the beta and I can't wait for the game to release in less than 10 days now as of the recording of this video. So without wasting too much time, we're going to get into the list, and I want to start off talking about all the things that I think were good about the beta and everything that I liked about the game. And I don't think I can talk about Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls without praising its presentation. From a visual standpoint, this game knocks it out of the park. And from a sound standpoint as well, when you talk about the art, the animations, and just the overall graphics, how vibrant and colorful everything is, the whole comic book inspired like design of the UI and everything like that from the menus, it's all perfect. Even as someone who's not like an avid comic book reader, it just feels like such a love letter to Marvel and to comic books, and I was just very impressed with this game's aesthetic. The designs for some of these characters are the coolest I've ever seen for them. All of the music in the game sounded really, really good, and I didn't go out of my way to listen to any of the tracks individually. I know that's something that some people have requested me to do. They want me to just like, you know, put the different like soundtracks on a tier list, or at least like react to them on stream or something like that, which I'm down to do. I was kind of just waiting for all of it to be out. I don't know if all of the songs are out. Regardless, all the character themes and stage themes that I just did hear passively while playing the game sounded phenomenal. And in my opinion, this is the best looking and sounding fighting game out right now. I guess technically it's not out yet, but once it releases, I think it's going to be the best looking and sounding fighting game out. And obviously that's subjective. Art is subjective at the end of the day. Some people might prefer like the Tekken style or the Street Fighter style, and those games are both obviously gorgeous as well, and I think they're the best looking games in those, you know, respective franchises. But for me, I like that anime look. I don't think that comes as a shock to anybody. But it's not just like the character models and like the music, it's also like the sound design, the sound effects in the game, and the voice acting. I feel like the voice actors killed it. Obviously Steve Bloom as Green Goblin and Wolverine, my main character for the beta, I mean, it's the voice of my childhood. He does an incredible job, you know what I mean? But then even Jessie Valinsky, I think is her name, the woman who voices Magic, just incredible. And it just like I said, everything just looks and sounds great. And I had to yap about that a little bit before anything else, because I was just really impressed with that. And it just really helps you get immersed and just immediately be like, oh, this game is sick, you know what I mean? There's also a lot of really cool dialogue between the characters. This game does that thing where depending on whether or not characters have lore reasons to talk to each other, any like history or background, they've got unique dialogue, and that's always like a really nice touch that I feel like they add to any other game. I've always appreciated moments like that in like a lot of the Dragon Ball games I've played, like what Dragon Ball Fighters does it, or even Sparking Zero, and the Injustice games obviously do things like that. It's not like a super uncommon thing in fighting games, but it's not like it exists in every fighting game. But seeing the characters interact in the way that they do in this game is really cool, and something that I can appreciate even as somebody who's not like a super big comic book fan. Oh, and something else that I think is a really nice touch is that when you're in the menu, like if you've already selected your team and then queued up for like casual matches or rank matches and training or whatever, once you've like solidified your team, they show up in the menu, and I just think that's a super cool touch. Oh, and then speaking of that, when you're in the main menu, they also have the ability, I believe it's triangle. You hit triangle, and that's quick training, and it just immediately puts you into training mode with your preset team. And you can also from then training mode go into casual queue, rank queue, whatever. And I just think that's a really great feature, because anytime you just allow me to get into matches or get into training mode as quickly as possible, it's for the better. So it's just a really nice quality of life thing that I really appreciate it, and it might exist in other games, but I haven't really seen a feature quite like that before. And then we get into some of the actual gameplay aspects. And one of the most important aspects of any fighting game to me is the movement. And I gotta be honest, I've been chasing the high of Dragon Ball FighterZ ever since I've stopped playing that game. I think I talked about it in my discussion with Inzum that has probably already been posted as we're recording this video. But the movement in Dragon Ball FighterZ is my favorite movement of any fighting game. And this isn't Dragon Ball FighterZ, but it's probably the closest thing I felt to it since DBFZ. The air dash obviously isn't as quick and as snappy and as low. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. I want to say it's like 14 frames or something like that in Tokon. I don't remember what it is in DBFZ, but it's definitely a lot faster. And if they wanted to make it like that, I would love that. I understand how it could lead to even more egregious mix-ups in the game than what might already exist, but I mean, yeah, but the jumping around, moving around, it doesn't feel nearly as clunky as it did to me in the original open beta, and I don't really know how much the actual movement has changed, but just overall just things just feel snappier, whether it's the wall breaks or, you know, tagging and everything of that nature. Like the game just feels really good to move around in. It can feel clunky at some points because of the way certain other systems get, but we'll talk about that a bit more when I get to my dislike section. But overall, I pretty much like the movement in the game. And since I mentioned it, we can go ahead and get to that. Let's talk about the wall breaks a little bit, because I only ever played the original beta. I believe it was a closed beta. I might have said open earlier by mistake, but that first closed beta, that's the only build of the game that I ever got the chance to play. Never played the second one, didn't get to play it at any events. Haven't participated or played it at all up until this past weekend with the open beta. And in that original beta, I felt like wall breaks were really slow, intrusive, really disruptive to the flow of gameplay. And I feel like they've done a great job of improving that. I think wall breaks just happen faster now. I think also I just have a better understanding of like their utility and how they work. And you know, you can also choose whether or not you want to break the wall just depending on the moves that you do. And then there's also the X-Mansion stage, which is like, you know, a stage that doesn't have stage transitions. I do think for the most part, I'm okay with it now. At times I could still be like, I didn't mean to do that, or I didn't want to transition here. I wish there wasn't stage transitions. But I think as we get more familiar with the game and just, you know, have better awareness of the stages that we're on and what part of the stage we're on and everything like that, I think it'll become less and less of an issue. I know there are some people out there who still feel that wall breaks are a bit too intrusive or happen too frequently. I think I have a much better understanding of their purpose and also how they are, I don't want to say restricting, but how they're limiting just how crazy some characters can get. Because when you are on that X-Mansion stage, or when you finally do reach the end of one of those stages, some characters can get some pretty crazy combos, and that's all well and good. But I think having those stage transitions makes it so that they kind of got to earn it a bit more and work for it a bit harder. And obviously stage transitions are also the main way that you unlock the rest of your team. So being able to quickly break that wall with a special move from your character, or even with a throw, is something that is probably valuable. Even though in the beginning, I wasn't so sure if I liked the way throws break the wall, but that's something else I might come back around to. But for the most part, the point is wall breaks / stage transitions feel much better in this version of the game than it did in that original beta. And speaking of combos, I think combos are really cool and really fun in this game. Now, obviously the game is still relatively new and relatively fresh, so I'm also taking that into account when I speak on this part, because obviously we're not optimal yet and we won't be for a very long time. And even though people are finding some really cool stuff, it's gonna be, you know, a drop in the bucket compared to what gets discovered once the game has actually been released and people are really allowed to sink their teeth in and fully you know, learn all the game's mechanics and, you know, expound upon that. And I think everyone's gonna have a great time in training mode in this game, just figuring out all the crazy mix-ups and combos that you can do. But they feel really fun to perform. I'm somebody who is a fan of long combos. I know that that's been like a topic of conversation in a game like Tekken. I think a game like this lends itself to having like those crazy block strings and mix-ups and combos, and it just feels more familiar, or I guess like it belongs in a game like this. You know, it feels more like the genre is just meant to be this way, you know what I mean? So and granted, I don't necessarily hate long combos in Tekken 8 either. I just kind of hate how long and drawn out they are. But even I don't have as big of an issue with it as a lot of people seem to in that game. Regardless, as it pertains to Tokon, you obviously have the accessibility of simple combos and like auto combos and things like that. And there are like some universal like combo strings that you can do with like basically every character. I can't say I've played every character, but at least most characters, right? The game has this really interesting mechanic where the more technical your combo is, the longer it's allowed to be. So you can actually kind of reduce the hit stun, or like the hit stun decay, or like the combo meter, by doing EX moves and tagging into your other characters and calling assists and things of that nature. And I think that's a really cool system to have. And obviously the more that gets explored, the crazier the combos are going to get. And, you know, characters are going to have pretty unique things to do as well. Like obviously this game's going to be a tag game, and with it being 4v4, at first we weren't sure that there was much incentive to actually play it like a 4v4 game because they only share one health bar. I think I've gotten a better understanding of why there's only one health bar in this game. And it's more so, again, an accessibility thing and from a casual standpoint. But I think the game does a really good job. My brain's all over the place. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so, but see, this is what I mean, because like with having more experience, having played the game now, I feel like I have a better understanding of why certain things are designed the way they are. And there's other things that I don't understand that we'll talk that I might like, or just maybe I don't have strong feelings about, or I'm unsure about. But it's like, if once I play the game more, maybe I'll have a better understanding. So let me slow down, let me dial it back. So let's go back to the combos, right? So you have really simple combos that you can perform. You have universal stuff you can do, similar to like a Dragon Ball FighterZ, right? But obviously the more advanced you get, the more technical you get, the better the combos are that you can perform. In this game, at first, one of the big criticisms that I and many others had was the fact that you share one health bar between 4 characters. And the biggest incentive that you have for swapping characters traditionally in a tag game is preserving your team and potentially recovering any health. Now you do have recoverable gray life in this game, but you don't recover it by swapping out characters because, again, one health bar. So then it begs the question, well then what's the incentive to tag? And one of the big incentives to tag is to get better combos, to cash out on more damage. And I think now that I've played the game a lot more and thought about it a lot more and reviewed footage and again just like kind of molded around in my mind, I think the idea and the goal with this game is obviously for it to have a really high skill ceiling, as you want any fighting game to be, and for it to be really crazy at a high level with it being 4v4 and having, you know, active tag and everything like that, but for it to not be too daunting and too scary for the casual player, for them to be able to jump in and still have fun without feeling like they have to learn 4 characters. And I think they might have been able to do that properly with the way they executed it, because with only having 1 health bar, as a newer or lower level or casual player, you might not feel like pushed or forced to learn all 4 characters. If you take a look at what myself and a lot of other players did this past weekend, many of us just stuck to learning 1 character as opposed to trying to learn a whole team, or at most some of the really good players at high level learned 2 characters and they were swapping between them and everything like that, right? But I think I think at a casual level, beginner level, like lower to middle level player, I think a lot of those guys will just be playing 1 characters, maybe 2, and maybe not tagging a whole lot or swapping a whole lot, except for maybe outside of combos. And who knows, like obviously as the game develops over time, even like the lower level will get more advanced and maybe they'll get to that point as well. But I think the game at face value, when you say 4v4, that's scary for a lot of people. A lot of people are like, oh man, that sounds so crazy, I'll never be able to learn 4 characters, learning 1 is already hard enough. But we looked at this game initially as, oh, it's really just 1v1 with 3 assists, but like, yes, but only at a certain level, because in order to take this game to its heights, you're gonna have to learn how to constantly be tagging in for mix-ups and extending combos and everything like that, which obviously people are gonna do that anyway, but I feel like I now understand and see the vision with why the game is designed the way that it is with that. Because if you're somebody who's newer, you just want to play Spider-Man and you just want 3 assists on your team, you can absolutely play the game that way and have a lot of fun. That's what I did this past weekend. I only played Wolverine with 3 assists, didn't want to change my team order, didn't want to tag out, didn't want to swap for combos or anything like that. Eventually I want to learn all that stuff, but I just feel like that would be the easiest way to play the game, learn its systems, and have some fun and play some matches for this past weekend with such limited time available to us to actually play it right. But you can absolutely play that way forever if you want. But if you want to take the game to the next level, that's where you start getting into the actual nitty-gritty, learning all the system mechanics, and that's where you really get to sink your teeth into the meat and potatoes of this game and the real fun and the real chaos and craziness of what it has to offer. Which is why when I saw so many people talking about, oh, this game has no sauce, this game has no mix-ups, I'm looking at everybody crazy, because it's like, how do you know that? How can we jump to those conclusions? How can you have that opinion when the game isn't even out yet? Because even by the end of the beta, people were figuring out all this crazy stuff that the majority of us weren't doing and weren't aware of. You know what I mean? And so there's so much that this game has left to discover and to learn and for us to be able to do that any opinions about the game has no sauce, the game is too slow, the game has no mix-ups, I don't believe it, because we hardly know anything yet. We're barely scratching the surface. And you know, if certain things are an issue, we can let it rock for a little, at least like the first month of the game, and then we can say like, hey, this actually is kind of dry, or this isn't so great, or this feels bad, or like they should speed this up, and we can do that. But the thing I want to say about that is I don't want us to be too hasty in our judgments and force developers to make these changes and decisions, because the thing that we should understand by this point is that, for one, we don't know everything, even though fighting game players are much better now than ever before at solving games and figuring things out and all these things, right? We are human at the end of the day. We do miss things. We don't understand everything. We aren't perfect. Not everybody's a genius, right? And beyond that, a lot of times when these developers do make changes, they're very reluctant to go back. So if they do something and then we don't like it, or it makes the game worse, or we find out, oh, actually they should have never done this because this existed and now this is actually incredibly broken, you know what I'm saying? Like, sure, they'll patch certain things, but like, you might get to a point where it's like, damn, if only we had never, if they had never done this, then we would have been just fine. You know what I'm saying? So I just want us to keep things like that in mind, because I see people like make these declarations or these like assumptions and draw these conclusions where it's like, yo, let things rock. And then also it's like, it doesn't help that some people don't think for themselves. So people see some people say something, whether it's a top player, bigger content creator, whatever the case may be, and then they take it and run with it without thinking for themselves or trying to learn or anything of that nature. And that can be very annoying. But yeah, I think the game has a lot to offer, which kind of takes me to my next point. I think characters are also very unique in this game. And so like with most of us having only spent time with really one character, there's a lot of things that we haven't figured out, and certain characters are going to be more popular than others, so they're going to be more explored. But when you think about Magic with her portals, Green Goblin with his glider, Danger with all her crazy setups, you know what I'm saying? These characters all have really unique things about them, traits, qualities, and moves. Black Panther with her bass, I forget it, but her, you know, her unique dash with the 4 gauge at the bottom. Spider-Man with the web zip. Like, these characters have some really cool, unique things about them that are going to lend to their gameplay and completely change how you approach neutral, how you do your mix-ups, what your combos look like. You know what I'm saying? The movement for the character as well. Like, it's cool. It's really cool, and you could tell how much I really enjoyed my time and how excited and passionate I am by my energy and like how quickly I start talking about some of these things. But I think overall the game has a lot to offer and a lot left to discover, and I think at the highest level it's gonna look really crazy. But it doesn't have to be that way for you if you're somebody who's newer or learning, and I think that's the beauty of the way that it's designed up to this point. It doesn't mean that I think that it's perfect, because in the second half of this video I have a lot of things that I don't like or that I'm unsure about, and we'll get into that. But I definitely want to give this game its flowers and sing its praises, because I think there is a lot to like about this game, and I think it has a lot of potential to be one of the big dogs, you know, in the FGC. Oh, and real quick, one last little thing I want to note before we do move on to the dislikes is the fact that you can actually call your unique assists in situations where you couldn't before. Like if you were doing like a combo or blockster and you always just got like the generic lariat assist, which again, I think is a smart implementation for like the lower casual level player. But you can actually use your assist more properly now, as we kind of expected, although not in every single way, but at least in that way. So yeah, I think that's a good change from the beta, or at least from the closed beta to now. I don't expect there to be any major changes, by the way, from the closed beta, or sorry, from the open beta to the full release of the game. I think at best we're going to get performance issues, which is something that I didn't mention in this video, but matter of fact, let's just go ahead and take a look at this right here. I haven't brought up the PC performance stuff up till now because I was fully confident that most, if not all of it, would be resolved by the time the game released. But the Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls official Twitter has addressed it and has essentially promised us that they're working on it and that things will be a lot better for the release of the game. So if we jump on over to the monitor, you can see Tokon Warriors, what a weekend. Thank you to everyone who jumped into the open beta and joined the fight. This is exactly why we run these, to get the game in your hands and find what we can make better before launch. To our PC players, message received. The team is already hard at work on the performance you deserve, with improvements lined up for day one, reducing overall CPU usage to improve performance, fixing frame rate drops and lag, resolving an issue causing unnecessary shader compilation at startup, improving compatibility when streaming with OBS and Discord, and addressing rollback netcode and cross-play issues. We are also working on fixes for a number of other reported issues. Every match you played taught us something, and we're heads down making sure Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls delivers at launch and beyond. This is just the start. See you on August 6th. So they are aware of all the issues, and here's my take on that. I didn't play on PC, so I didn't have that experience. Obviously, I have some friends who played on PC, and I played against PC players, so I saw, you know, the issues that people were having. But I wasn't personally directly affected by it with my own, you know, gameplay experience, because I was playing on console. And I'll probably mostly be playing on console when the game does launch, but I'll probably get the game on both because content creator reasons. Regardless, I am of the opinion and of the belief that a lot of the performance issues people were having was because of, you know, the million different anti-cheats and encryption stuff that they added to the game to make sure that it wasn't getting cracked and data mined and everything like that to protect it, which I think some of that stuff will be alleviated naturally when the game launches. But obviously there are things even beyond that that they intend to address and fix, hopefully in time for the launch of the game. And I hope that they do day one have this game like on its P's and Q's, because again, I think this game has a lot of potential, and it's already not going to be available on Xbox with it being a Sony game, with it being a PlayStation game, right? So you're already limiting the player base in that degree to either PC or PlayStation. So you really need to knock it out of the park and not completely omit another big chunk of the player base by being on PC. Now, given between PlayStation, PC, and Xbox was already going to be the lowest on the totem pole anyway, just in terms of player count. But that is like a whole group of people that you are excluding. So it is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So at the very least, you need to make sure that it is playable and functioning properly for PC players. That being said, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some of the things that I disliked about the game, or some of the things I was kind of unsure of like how to feel, because there's a decent amount of them. First things first, everyone and their mom has been talking about this one, whether you're a streamer, player, creator, person on Twitter, whatever. The input reader is pretty bad. I won't lie, the input reader was a bit rough. You know, there were a lot of people that were struggling to get proper DP inputs, because like if you didn't end on like down forward, you would get like, so if you try to do like, you know, 623 but you did 6236, you would get a fireball input as opposed to a DP. So you had to be pretty precise with like your 623 input and things of that nature. And there's also things like with Lord Knight, right, who was playing Storm. I know he expressed to me that Storm has a command normal with her J6H, and that's a normal that you want to use in combos, but you don't get the J6H if you do J9H, but you do get like J2H if you do like J1 or J3, right? Meaning that if you do, sorry for those of you who aren't familiar with numpad notation, so basically she has a jumping forward heavy attack, right? But if you do up forward, you don't get it, which means that it's that much more difficult to do combos and a bit less practical. And it's odd that it works that way, considering that if you do down back or down forward, you do get the down input for like a J2H. It's a bit weird. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think they should make it so that you do get that, or at least make it a little bit more lenient. And then again, even just with things like with, you know, quarter circles and DP inputs, they probably got to clean that up a little bit. I think that's a relatively easy fix for them to make. So I'm not too worried about that and like the whole buffer system. I think those are just like, you know, quick numbers you can change in the code, and it should probably fix that. The next thing I want to talk about is that the control scheme is a bit funky in this game. It reminds me a lot of 2XKO, where it feels like there's a lot of different buttons, and I think one of the biggest reasons for that is because they have a dash macro by default, which is fine. They have the quick skill option so that you don't have to do actual motion inputs, which I think is also fine. Those are obviously optional. You don't have to use them. You can even completely remove them from your control if you want. But one thing you can't really like change, I mean, you can change where they are, but you can't like remove entirely, and you can't like type the same thing, is that assist and tag are two different buttons. And at first I felt like, oh, this is kind of unintuitive. I'm not the biggest fan. And I guess they made that change partially because people complained about accidentally tagging a lot when they didn't mean to. And I mean, I was guilty of doing that myself, but I just felt like it was a skill issue that just with time and just more experience and less mashing, you would just, you know, play around better and just not do as much. I just, you know, I chalk things like that up to input error. But again, after having spent more time with the game and thinking about it a lot more and like reviewing some footage, I think having that access to a different button for your tagging and your assist is what's going to open up the higher level of this game when you're doing certain mix-ups and block strings and combos with how you tag into your characters. I think those being separate buttons is what's going to unlock certain aspects of this game. So it's one of those things that I didn't really like at first, but again, for one, just after playing the game a bunch this weekend, I was starting to get used to it anyway, and I play with a completely default control scheme. A lot of times when I play games, like I'll map certain things like my shoulder buttons, or I'll swap things around. And I did consider changing the assemble button and the unique button, but at the end of the day, I just left it alone and I kind of got used to it. Not to say that I won't ever change my control scheme, but I pushed myself to just play with the default controls at the start, and I was able to stick through it throughout the whole beta, and it wasn't really much of an issue. Like I didn't like it at first, but I got used to it. So I gotta imagine with the full release of the game, by the time I've played for a week or two, I really won't even think too much about it, because it does feel better than 2XKO, but it does remind me of 2XKO. But there's just like, like we're getting close to having too many different buttons for this game. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about with this game that I wasn't the biggest fan of is how assists function in this game in terms of like when you're able to call them. So you cannot call your assists like during certain animations, like when you're attacking, like whether you're doing a combo or a block string. And it makes the game feel clunkier than it really is, because traditionally in a tag game, right, you have the freedom, like in Dragon Ball FighterZ, to call your assist at any point during your combo or block string, but you kind of have to wait until the move is completely over before you do that in this game. And it makes it feel like your assists are coming out slower, like it's delayed, or like the game is clunkier. And it's one of those things where, like, again, you kind of do get used to it as you start to understand the system more and you get better with your timing. And one could also argue, well, I mean, if you're calling your assists at the time that you should be in order to properly combo or do, you know, proper block strings, it wouldn't matter anyway, because they'll always come out like when they need to, when they're supposed to. But again, I think it's just, this one's kind of like vibes. It's just about feel. It doesn't feel good. And I do think feel is very important, because there are certain games that just feel bad. And this game doesn't feel bad most of the time, but sometimes it does. And the way assists work in this game is one of the things that I think is the biggest contributors to that. The other time as well where it feels pretty bad is that you cannot call your assist directly after being in block stun. Again, I don't know the exact numbers, the exact amount of frames that this lasts for, but there is a lockout period after you've been removed from block stun until you're allowed to call your assist again, which makes it very annoying and very difficult to deal with zoning, especially depending on the character that you play. I didn't realize how powerful Wolverine's like EX projectile is and how it beats projectiles. So when I was up against like Iron Man or Magic, who were like spamming fireballs and also calling their assists, it's really hard to fight back, because not only might you be playing a character who doesn't necessarily have the best neutral or the best, mechanics to fight back against that type of playstyle, but then also you can't even call your own assist to fight back, because they're constantly pelting you with fireballs and uni beams and all these other things, and blade assists or Black Panther assists, or Star-Lord, Spider-Man, whatever the case may be. I am personally of the opinion that they probably should reduce that lockout a tiny little bit. But again, I don't want to have too many like harsh opinions or make strong judgments, or like, again, make any like grand declarations about things that need to be changed, because I want to remain open-minded. I want to give the game some time to breathe. I want to experience the game in its current state. And I think there are certain things that like can and should be fixed, but when it comes to like certain gameplay aspects, it's like, okay, like this may not feel good, but doesn't need to be changed. And the lockout thing, like I think most people would be inclined to agree, but maybe there are other reasons for that decision that I don't quite understand yet, because that has been the case for certain systems within the game, or certain decisions that they made, where it's like I didn't understand the philosophy before when I played it originally, and throughout watching other builds, But now that I played it this weekend, I think I have a better understanding of why certain things are the way that they are. This isn't one of them yet, though. You know what I'm saying? The assist lockout feels a bit too long. I feel like you could reduce that and it'd probably be better. Oh, and then with assists, on a similar note, one of the things that I wasn't very sure how to feel about and that I didn't necessarily like at first is the whole assemble gauge system itself, right? So below your health bar, you have this green gauge that has basically, people call them pips or bars, whatever. I'm gonna say bars. That has 3 bars on it, right? You have 3 bars of meter that allows you to call your assists in combos and block strings, right? If you call your assist in neutral, it doesn't take up any of that resource. But if you call it in combos and block strings, it takes up that resource. And at first I was kind of just like, why not just have a more traditional system where it works the same, where your assists are just on cooldown, you call it whatever you want. And like in my head, I'm just like, yeah, just do it like Dragon Ball Fighters or like any other tag game ever, where you call your assist and it's just like, you know, you call it during a combo, block string, neutral, whatever, it's on cooldown. It has however much recovery time, 3, 4, 5 seconds, whatever, and then it's back again. This game does it very differently, where in neutral, your assists cover almost instantly. Like if you're full screen and just mashing assists, which by the way, you can just hit like, so on PlayStation, right? Like on my controllers, it's X, right? Your X would be your symbol button. You just go bang, 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 and you can call your assists back to back to back to back. So you don't have to do forward, down, back. You can just mash X 3 times and get all your assists in neutral, and then they recover almost immediately. But in combos and block strings, it takes your symbol gauge. But again, this is one of the things where I feel like I have a better understanding of why it is the way that it is now, because I think that's going to be another separator between like the lower level and the higher level, where you're able to call your assists in neutral and mash them as much as you want. And then it takes a resource in order to get like those better combos and block strings. But I think with the system currently, as it's currently constructed, with some of the stuff I've seen like on Twitter and everything now, there are going to be times where you're going to be able to do certain extensions without actually using that resource, even though ordinarily you'd be able to if you have the proper, you know, skill and knowledge to do so. I've seen some examples of players being able to do some pretty crazy stuff without actually taking up any of their assemble gauge. Whether or not that's intentional or by design, I guess we'll see, and whether or not that's something that they change, who knows. But based off seeing that, I'm like, I think that's an intentional design choice that separates, again, like that really advanced level between, you know, that and everybody else. And also when you think about it, it's kind of like, well, if I just look at the assemble gauge as just like a cooldown system anyway, like in a very similar vein, then it's really not that big of a deal. Like if I just change my perspective and look at it less like a meter and just more like a timer anyway, it kind of just made more sense to me. And I just like, again, it's just one of the things that became less of an issue as I continued to play the game. I didn't really like it at first, and it's like I still don't love it, but again, I think with more experience, and especially if things do work the way that I think they do based off some of the stuff I've seen now, it probably won't be that big of a deal. Now, whether or not that becomes too powerful or too broken, if you're able to circumvent the assemble gauge all the time will tell. But as of right now, I'm like, that's really interesting. That's really cool. Moving on to some other things that I wasn't a big fan of, jump lights aren't overheads in this game. And again, I don't know if it's just because they're that afraid of people getting fuzzied or the mix-ups being too nasty in this game, but it's one of those things where like, I guess it's not the end of the world, but it's another one of those things that just feels weird. Like jump lights not being overhead it just feels weird. I really don't have too much to say beyond that, where at first I was like, oh, this is kind of dumb. But again, after playing the game some more, it's like, okay, just use JM, just use JH, things like that. And I also get it because maybe it would just be way too easy at that point to high-low people if the air dash was faster and or if jump lights were overhead. So it is what it is. It feels like a really weird design choice, but like it doesn't make or break the game for me. I would also then transition that to say that lights in general just feel bad in this game. And the reason for that is because they're kind of slow and they have more recovery. Like I played Wolverine and his neutral just doesn't seem the best in the first place. So he seems like a bit of a stubby character in general, right? He's the only character that I really played, so take this opinion with a bit of a grain of salt. But there are some numbers that I do actually have for this a little bit, because so in Marvel Tokon, the lights feel, I don't want to say sluggish, they just feel slower than I guess what my brain expects and what I'm used to. Again, obviously, always going to bring Dragon Ball back into the conversation, right? When you whiff a light or a 5L in Dragon Ball, it's like 18, 19 frames, you know what I'm saying? And then like a 2L could be like 20 to 22, somewhere around there, right? In Marvel Tokon, when I whiff a 5L with Wolverine, not only is his 5L like pretty stubby and the buttons are just slower, it was like 24, 25 frames on whiff, which is a decent jump. It feels like mediums in Guilty Gear, you know what I'm saying? So lights are just worse than you kind of would expect. And they just have a lot more recovery than you would expect. So like you can whiff a light and like really get footsied and die for. Like there were times when I was playing against like a Magic player or something like that, right? Which Magic just seems to have like the best normals in the game, or at least some of the best normals in the game, on top of just being a blessed and very powerful character in general with her damage and everything. Don't even get me started on Magic. But yeah, like I'd whiff a light let alone a 2L, which was even worse. And it's like, oh damn, like I really died for whiffing that, because like you would expect, it's like, oh, like it's a light, like your brain and common sense and fighting game logic and experience tells you like, oh, like I should be using my lights because that's the quick, fast, safe, normal. But it kind of felt to me more like a game like 2XKO, where like I don't really use my lights that much in 2XKO. It's kind of a run up 5M kind of game, you know what I'm saying? Like when I'm playing Ari, when I'm playing Akali, like I'm almost never using 5L for the most part. Maybe when I'm staggering in block strings or something like that. And that's another thing as well, is that because of how much recovery normals felt like they had in Tokon, staggering felt weird and kind of difficult, and it felt really easy for the opponent to like jump out of block strings in general. You know what I'm saying? And again, like I can't stress enough, take all of my dislikes and the things that I'm unsure about with a grain of salt, because again, the key phrase there is that I'm unsure about. Like these are partially things that I didn't like, but these are also certain things that like as I play the game more, I can get used to them. Or maybe as I play the game more, when it finally drops, I continue to feel the same way and I'm like, I kind of think this should change. Whether or not that's something that will change, I don't know. And again, because of the nature of the game anyway, like you block a medium anyway, it's like you know you're about to go into a block string, into special, into assist, into tag, into make, you know what I'm saying? So maybe it won't even be that big of a deal. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, personally, I would just prefer the lights to just be just a little bit faster, just to be a little bit safer. I don't think it would be the end of the world if my light wasn't -25 on whiff. You know what I'm saying? But, you know. Oh, that actually reminds me of something I forgot to mention early in my likes with lights, because maybe part of the reason is because they didn't want auto combos to be as strong as they are in DBFZ, which they aren't, in the sense that like auto combos don't come out at all on whiff in this game, which I think is a big plus. I like that a lot. I think Dragon Ball FighterZ would have been a better game if that was the case. And you know, I don't mind things having recovery and like there being like actual whiff punishment and stuff in the game. I think that's fine. It's just the lights just kind of threw me off. Then there's also like the Gatlings, like the 4-button string limit. Like, you know, if you do like light, medium, heavy, or light, medium, medium, it's kind of like the end of your string. You can't do like 5. And I've seen a lot of back and forth about this. And here's something I'll say about this, because this is something commonly I've seen. It's not about being hit confirmed. This is another one of those things where it's just about feel. It just doesn't feel good to be limited to that 4. It just feels a lot better to be able to do like 5 buttons, for example. Like even just that one extra button would make the game feel a lot better. And again, I can't express enough how much that feel is important and how much it means. But again, it's one of those things where maybe you just play more and you just kind of get used to it. Like it wasn't the end of the world when I was playing, but there were occasions where I was like, damn, I don't get an extra button here in the string. You know what I mean? There are certain things I'm saying here, and I could understand the argument to some extent. People are like, oh, you just want this game to feel like every other game, right? Why can't this game be unique? Why can't it be different? It's doing its own thing. And to that, I would say there is some logic there. I somewhat understand your perspective or your viewpoint, but I would also say that making things different or worse just for the sake of being unique or different is not good. You don't get brownie points from me with that. I think there are certain times where we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and things would probably be better off if we go a more traditional route. And again, I'm not here to say whether I am right or wrong about these things necessarily, but what I am saying is that it's not about wanting the game to just be a copy of every other game. There are just certain things where it's like, I don't understand this decision and it doesn't feel very good. And maybe that my opinion on that and my perspective on that will change with time. But like I said, there are certain things like when I thought about it a lot more, I was able to understand the perspective, or like the philosophy, or at least maybe somewhat understand more of the mindset, like the decision making behind it. And there's certain things I still don't necessarily get. So yeah, the windows for pressing these buttons also felt very tight. Like it felt like you didn't have a lot of time to delay your buttons because of how much recovery things have, right? So again, like when I'm trying to like stagger pressure and I want to do like light and then delay the light into another medium, or like light, delay the string medium to try to catch my opponent mastering or something like that, it felt really difficult to do that. Again, I don't know if that was just input error or skill issue or what, but it felt like you had to be like pretty tight with your timing, like on your Gatlings, if you wanted it to like consistently come out as a full string without your opponent just being able to like jump out of it or mash or something like that, right? Or try to use some of the game's defensive mechanics, which by the way, let's get into that. The defensive mechanics of this game, I'm not the biggest fan of. So you have the crossover, which is basically like an alpha counter or like a guard cancel. Then you have the crossover counter, which is like this invincible backdash, like parry kind of mechanic. So crossover itself is the mechanic that you do by inputting light plus assist. So for me, that'd be square plus X, which is for most of you if you left your controls default, right? And basically you use one assemble gauge to get out of your opponent's block string for essentially free, right? Not really free because you're using an assemble gauge, but it's your get out of jail free card. The thing about it though is that like at the surface level, it seems really powerful, and maybe it will be at a lower level, and maybe this is why it's designed this way. But by the end of the beta, I was getting to the point where I want to say 60 to 70% of the time when my opponent tried the mechanic, I was getting the perfect parry, which is when you do the same input back And when you do that, you not only negate them trying to get out of your block string, but you disassemble their team, meaning that for a certain amount of time, and again, sorry, I don't know the exact amount of frames or like the exact amount of seconds that they're locked out, but you break up their team, they don't have access to their assists. They don't have access to their assemble gauge, so they can't cross over, they can't call assists, they can't extend their block strings, combos, or anything like that for a certain amount of time. And that's really powerful. I will say, even as the attacker, when somebody tried to do crossover and then I perfectly parried it, which I was doing most of the time by the end of the beta, I still felt like there were situations where I was at the disadvantage, where like, let's say if I did like Wolverine Rekka, and then they did it like during the Rekka, which is a logical place to do it in, right? It's like, oh, he's not gonna be able to, you know what I'm saying? And then I react, it's like, I'm still doing the Rekka after the animation plays out. They go backward, and then I kind of feel like I'm in recovery or like whiffing and I'm able to get punished, or they're able to, you know, wake up and attack before I'm able to continue my pressure. That's like, so you tried your get out of jail free card during my offense, and I did the perfect counterplay, not even just the regular counterplay to just reacting to it in general, but like I timed it perfectly. And then I still kind of feel disadvantaged. So it's like, on one hand, it's like I feel like I need more reward there, but on the other hand, it felt way too easy to do the perfect counter. So I don't really know. Maybe it's one of those things where it's like it's a mechanic that's really designed more so for the lower level of play, so that they're not constantly being oppressed, because again, they want this game to be accessible and fun and not too overwhelming for lower level players and casual players and beginner players. But you know, at a high level, that mechanic is going to be effectively useless, it feels like, because if somebody of my skill level is like already reacting to it most of the time and perfectly countering it most of the time, you know, the pros are going to be perfectly reacting to it every single time. And I think that with enough experience, I'm also capable of getting to the point where 95 to 100% of the time I'll be perfectly reacting to that. And then there's going to be situations where like every once in a while you're just low-key just not expecting it and it catches you off guard, but it's relatively easy to react to, generally speaking. Again, the perfect one is not that much more difficult. There's like the word crossover appears in the background and it fills up with ink, and you have to like time it with in sync with the word getting filled up in order to get the perfect version. But even then, there's some leniency, because it doesn't have to be perfectly filled up all the way. You can leave a bit of a gap and still get the perfect version. So I don't know, does that mechanic need to be changed, or is it designed the way that it is so that it is useless at high level but effective at the lower level, where players just reactions are just worse and they're just not used to things like that? I don't really know. And then you have the crossover counter, I believe, which is like where you get like that orange aura or whatever around your character, and they do like the little backdash, and it beats everything as far as, you know, strikes and throws and stuff like that. I'm personally not a fan of it beating throws. I feel like it should lose to throws. That should be the weakness of it. But since the defense mechanics in this game in general aren't all that, like maybe it's not big of a deal. I don't know. It's just like when I would be playing sometimes and my opponent would like do that on wake up and like it would beat the throw. I'm just like, I don't like that. And speaking of wake ups, the wake ups also feel really weird with like the canned animation that the character gets and the small period of invincibility frames that they have on wake up. I'm again not the biggest fan of that either. And then like, you know, them rolling forward and teching, it just kind of reminds me of 2XKO a little bit, which it's weird. You know, as the game progresses, and especially with having access to 3 assists, there might be, you know, Oki steps that you can do and everything like that kind of limit the options your opponent has, and you're able to contain them a lot more. And that's something I'll definitely be looking into and be on the lookout for, because as it stands right now, I don't like it. It feels weird and awkward. It doesn't need to be changed. I don't know. I'm not advocating for that. It's another one of those things where I'm just kind of unsure about. Wasn't a fan of it, and so it's just another thing I wanted to mention here in this video. But you know, I'll give it some time to see like what people cook up and how to properly deal with it and get better about that. I've already starting to see stuff where like you can do a similar thing like in 2XKO, where you use the dash macro and you can chase your opponent's roll, and you know, cover it with certain options like an air dash H or an air dash M or something like that, and so on and so forth. But you know, and then you also have the option of probably just calling your assists on knockdowns. You'll probably almost always have access to at least one assist, generally speaking, right, with having 3 of them at any given moment. So another thing to keep in mind. I guess it also depends on like if you use them in a combo or block string prior to like getting the hit and knocking it down, right? So I guess it depends. Regardless, wasn't the biggest fan of it, but subject to change on that. Speaking of your assists, there's a few more things I haven't mentioned about them that, again, I'm just not really sure how to feel. The fact that they have like basically no recovery and they're just extremely spammable and neutral, not sure how I feel about that. Like on one hand, it felt good to almost always have access to my assists, but on the other hand, it felt bad for my opponent to always have access to their assists. You know what I'm saying? So at least like you both have it, but again, it goes back to the other thing I said before as well, like with the assist lockout, where they're able to constantly, you know, pelt you with projectiles and their own assists, and you can't because you're locked out of yours. And it feels like they just always have them. They're just always in recovery. So wasn't the biggest fan of that. Also, assists seem to have like this small window where they're invincible. They get like this green flash and then like this aura around them where you can't hit them. And I don't like that. Your assists, from what I could tell, also don't seem to go away when the point character gets hit. Again, not the biggest fan of that either. And gonna repeat myself, not sure if those are things that need to change, but in the heat of the moment, like in the battle, during my experience with the beta, wasn't a fan of those things. Doesn't make or break the game for me, but those are just some thoughts. It also just feels like it creates a lot of visual noise and clutter and just creates like a lack of visual clarity on the screen. Obviously 4v4 is going to be chaotic, it's going to be crazy, and some people will say like, well, yeah, that's the point. But like, I mean, it's a bit like 3v3 is already a lot for most people. 4v4 obviously is going to be pretty nutty, but I don't know, having 8 characters on screen at the same time at any given moment is just kind of wild. Like if two players are just on opposite ends of the screen and they're just spamming assists constantly, it's like, for one, that could just get like really repetitive and monotonous and boring and lame and just like be an unfun way to engage with the game. And it could be like a novelty that wears off really quickly, and I can see how it could be fun or funny at first, and then eventually it's like, okay, like this is ridiculous. Again, not saying it needs to change, but just wasn't the biggest fan of it. It wasn't really much of an issue in the beta, but I could see it becoming an issue later on. So there's all that, and I think last but not least, the last thing that I kind of thought about is throws. Throws basically reset you to neutral in this game. So like if you would throw mid-screen, you'd like throw the opponent a decent distance away, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that because I was like, I'm not necessarily trying to get a mix-up on throw, but like, dang, I get like no Oki at all off the throw, and then also throws triggering wall break when you're in the corner or like stage transition. Didn't like that at first either, but stage transition seems so powerful, obviously with you gaining access to your assists, and there are characters that have options that can kind of cover the round start scenario. Like with Wolverine, if I do my down unique skill, it's a low that reaches them from that angle. Black Panther's got stuff. A lot of characters probably have things they can do. Their magic feels like she just does 5M and it reaches there, you know, out the gate with the big old sword normals that have like these just jointed hitboxes. Some characters are very privileged in that sense, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, like I wasn't really sure how I feel about that. I still see, at first I was like, I wish the game had a lot less stage transitions, because at times it did feel intrusive or disruptive to the flow of the gameplay and everything like that. But then there's times where I'm like, but maybe it's better if it has that, because again, you constantly getting wall splat might not be the best thing either. So I'm still kind of, again, it's one of those things, I'm just unsure how I feel about it. You know, I do kind of wish throws didn't send you back to complete neutral and throw your opponent nearly full screen, but you know, it is what it is. But those are pretty much most of my thoughts and opinions on the beta in terms of things that I liked, didn't like, or things that I was kind of unsure of how to feel about. I don't know how long this video is after all the editing, but I've been sitting here yapping for like an hour or so. Yeah, I tried my best to go into detail and just kind of cover everything. Not to say that I didn't forget anything, but I spent a lot of time thinking about all these things. And like I said, even though I feel like I had a lot of things that I didn't like, or that I was like, that I found questionable, most importantly, I want to reiterate, I still thought the game was really fun at the end of the day. I think this game has so much potential. And if it lives up to even 70% of that, I think we're in for an all-timer, you know what I'm saying? I think I'm going to really enjoy this game. I can't wait to get my hands on it again. I'm looking forward to that full release more than you guys know. You could tell probably how excited I am about this. I'm constantly just yapping and excited and pumping out all this content for it. And I was playing that beta nonstop. And the game is really, really cool, man. It's really fun. I think it's really good. And I think it can be even better. And I think it'll get better. They've been very receptive to a lot of the feedback that's been given to them. It feels like, in my opinion, they've taken the right feedback into account and made the right changes, because again, my enjoyment levels and my appreciation of the game from the closed beta to this open beta, tenfold. I did not like the game that much, to be honest, in the first beta, and I wasn't that vocal about it. I kind of was a little bit on my stream, but that's why I'm so excited now, because it's like it's a huge sigh of relief. Like, whoo, they improved things a lot, because I was like, damn, bro, I really want to like this game. I really want this to be the one, but I don't know if it's going to be. To now, I'm like, hey, I think this might be the one, y'all. This might be the game I've enjoyed the most since, you know what I mean? So that's going to be all. I know this was a long video, but hopefully y'all enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already, so you can stay tuned for all those content when I bring you. But with all that being said, that's pretty much all I have today. And remember, nothing can happen to you swing the bat. Later.